It's Monday. It's slightly after 7 o'clock, which means it's time to start drawing things in 3 whole dimensions. We started a new project last week. We got the beginnings of our pinhole camera going. And this week, so last week we drew a can. Here, let me do a reveal via the camera here. We drew a can, so it's a can like this. And this week, we're going to draw the top or bottom of our pinhole camera. So it's a threaded bit, and hopefully when you 3D print it, it won't be all crunchy like mine is. But it's a threaded piece. And then I got a little tripod mount thing in the bottom there. But you stick the film in. Stick the film in there. Close it up. We'll make ours so you don't have to turn it for a full inch, because that was a terrible design decision on my behalf. And then you put it on your whatever. You could stick some magnets in there, and you could like magnet stick it to something outside, and then you make your exposure. So let's do that. We're gonna make some threaded bits. We're gonna do some embossing of text on the outside, because I thought that would be fun. So let me open up my pinhole camera file here. Something I'm going to do right off the bat is I'm going to go ahead and make my can my active component. So I'll turn on the little radio button next to my can there. And I am going to make my can hollow. Just like the decal on the outside, this is kind of totally superfluous. But it's kind of fun to have things be as accurate as possible. So let's go ahead and do that. A can is not a solid body. So there is a single command that you can use to make a complicated shape like this hollow. So from the modify menu, if we scroll down to the 4th option from the top, it is the shell command. So what this shell command will allow us to do is, if we click on the part of the face that we want to be the opening of our shell, which is this top cylinder here, that top circle, that highlights blue, and we can see in our shell window we've got 1 selected. And now I can just type in like 0.01, and now we got a hollow can. The direction that I'm hollowing it is from the inside, because we measured very carefully our can width, so we want to shrink it away from the inside and not add to the outside of it. So I'll go ahead and say OK. So now we got a nice can. I know 0.01 is probably not the exact thickness of a can, but we're just trying to get close-ish here, so good enough for government work, as they say. All right, we've got our can here. Now let's make a new component that will hold our top. So in order to make my new component, I'm going to make my main document component my active component momentarily. I'm doing that because I'm going to make a new component, and I want my new component to live inside of my main document component and not have it nested inside of my can component. So now that I've got my main document component, my active component, I'll go ahead and click on Create, and then New Component. Alright, so this component is our top, or I suppose bottom, depending on how you plan on orientating this thing, right? I guess it's, it could be either way, so I leave it up to you. Or I suppose we could call it the cap as well. That makes sense. So it's the thing that closes off whichever side you choose. We're gonna choose to have it inside of the component that is selected already. The parent is going to be this selected component, which is our main document component. And I'm going to choose to make it active right away. So I've got that little checkbox selected because I'm going to start making stuff right inside of that component there. So I'll go ahead and click on OK. All right, cool. So our component is made here, and you can see the can has kind of ghosted itself out. And that is because our can is no longer our active component. In fact, our can isn't even inside of the component that is our active component. So anything that is not our active component or a component inside of our active component kind of gets ghosted out and disappears. So if you can't see your beautiful can that we spent an hour drawing last week, don't panic. It's still there. It's just faded into the fourth dimension. And we're only looking at our three-dimensional world right now. All right. Now, let's draw a circle at the top of our can here. And if I zoom in, I probably should have made that hollow later. I do indeed have a flat surface up here, so if I go ahead and click on the Create menu and I choose to create a sketch. Now I want to create this sketch at the top edge, at the top surface of my can. So I'm going to zoom in and I can see that kind of ghosted out top edge of my can. And I can click on it and specify that little tiny 0.01 inch surface as the surface I want to create my sketch on.
I got a little pop-up thing.
What does it say?
Some component positions have changed. Capture or revert component position.
I would always say capture. As long as you're looking at the thing and it looks right. You know, if you're looking at your drawing and it's like all my components have moved in some way, shape, or form apart from each other, then maybe I would second guess that. But whenever you move things around, you get that dialog box that says, hey, you want to capture this position? And I always say yes. Yeah. All right, so we're going to draw our, a couple of circles here, but I want to use the existing geometry that we already spent all that time drawing in the last class. So if I want to use this circle and kind of bring it over onto this sketch, from my Create menu, I can find the Project Include menu and then scroll over to Project. So this project tool will let us take like existing geometry that already exists in our world and project it over onto the surface that we're currently working on. So I'm going to zoom in real close here because I want to make sure I pick the outside edge of my can. I don't want the inside edge of my can. I definitely want the very outer edge. And I'll just go ahead and click on that circle to specify that as the geometry that I want to project. And then I'll say OK. So now we've got our first purple line here. So if I, just for the sake of saving some clutter, I can take my can component and I can just turn off the visibility on that, just with a little eyeball next to that can component. So I don't get, so my workspace is not cluttered up with all sorts of stuff. How are we doing? Following? Good? All right, cool. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is I'd like to create a circle that is a little bit bigger than this circle. So this is kind of like the inside. Let's just unscrew this here. This is our inside edge that's meeting up with our can, right? So we're going to make that circle that is the outside of this that will eventually be threaded. And to do that, I like to make it exactly 1/4 of an inch bigger. So from the Modify menu, there is a super useful command called Offset. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an offset. The sketch curve that I'm offsetting is in fact, I'm going to zoom in again here and make sure I click on that purple line. And if I just drag my mouse out with our little blue arrow tool here, and I type in 0.25 inches, that'll give me a 1/4 of an inch thick cylinder that we're about to make here. So that's really useful when you don't know the dimension or don't really need the dimension of that first circle. Like I could have went to the Create menu and grabbed my center diameter circle tool and then made a center diameter circle that was, exactly 1/4 of an inch bigger than the can. So measure the can again and then add 1/4 of an inch to that. But this is just an easy way to specify that size.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
That's kind of related. Okay, so if I wanted to offset again, like another 1/4 inch, I just tried to do it just to see, but it said that it was already an offset.
Correct.
Is there a way to offset the top of my offset?
There is not. So,
okay, so you have to do it from the original.
yeah, we do indeed want to make another offset because we want to have another circle for our outer edge for our part that's going to screw onto here. And you can't, as we just discovered here in class, it says, hey, you can't offset a curve that's already been offset. I don't know why that's the case. It seems to me that Fusion should just be able to do that. But for some reason, it won't let you do that, and you have to go back to the original line.
But it'll let you do the original one again?
Yeah,
okay.
You can offset the original one as many times as you want to. And we're going to offset a second circle 1/2 of an inch. So now we've got 2 circles that are offset from our projected exterior of our can. These offsets, sometimes I like to leave them inside of here because I think it's less descriptive if you have the measurement outside. I mean, I guess I could still tell what's going on. There's an arrow clearly indicating there. But sometimes I find it helpful to leave these measurements inside there, and then I can really tell it's an offset from a distance kind of thing. But I let you can do however you want to organize your drawing. All right, so that is all. That is all the drawing we're going to do for now. So I'm going to go ahead and say finish sketch. All right, so we've got our cap component. Inside of our cap component, just like we have inside of our can component, we now have a sketches folder. And that sketches folder has a sketch in it. And we're going to call this the profile, or the cap profile. Or you can call it the top, or, I guess anything is better than sketch 1. Doesn't really matter. Anything is better than sketch 1. Especially when you have multiple components, then you also have multiple sketch 1s. So it gets confusing very quickly. All right, so now we want to extrude out our first cylinder here. So from the Create menu, I'm going to go ahead and choose the Extrude option. I'm going to take that interior cylinder and I'm just going to extrude it down 1/2 of an inch. I think a half of an inch will be plenty of threads. I made mine like 1.5 inches, and I think that's uncalled for. It just makes for a lot of threading. So I think a half an inch will be plenty. Suppose if you wanted to go crazy, you could go 3/4. But again, I think a half inch will be plenty. And this will be a measurement that we can always change later. So half of an inch, new body, and I'm going to say okay. Alright, so now that we've made our first three-dimensional shape, now we have a body in our bodies folder, and a body inside of that bodies folder. This is going to be my inner. I guess I'm just going to call it inner.
Mine doesn't look like yours. I'm missing my outside. You did the wrong extrusion. I'm missing that outside offset on mine.
So you have.
When you do extrusion, it turns off the sketch. You have to go and turn the sketch on again.
Oh.
Yeah, there you go.
Wait, what? How do I do
Yeah.
that?
So sometimes I probably turned this setting off. So when you extrude something from a sketch or revolve something from a sketch,
Oh, I see.
oftentimes Fusion will hide your sketch that you just extruded something from. It goes, hey, you're done. You must be done using that. I want to say there is a preference that I have turned off. Probably in drawing. Yeah, I don't remember. Here we go. If you open up the preferences, if you don't want, I found that really annoying. So preferences you get by clicking on your icon up in the top right hand corner and saying preferences, and then in the design section there is this option that says Autohide sketch on feature creation, and I have unchecked that because I found it super annoying when my sketches just disappeared, because I often do this kind of thing where I will make multiple things in one sketch. Just makes sense for me. So I turned off that Autohide because
Otherwise,
that
you just have to go back in and
turn it on. Yeah, it's just it's another click that you got to do. So all right, cool. So now we've got our inner piece made. Let's make our outer piece as well. So from the create menu, I'm going to come down to extrude again. I'm going to extrude out. I'm going to extrude down in the same direction. So for me, on this time, I feel like it was just 0.5 last time, and now this time I have to do negative 0.5 in order to have it go in the same direction, but we definitely wanted to extrude out in the same direction. And instead of the operation that is join, I want to choose to make an operation that is new body. And that's because when I make this second shape, I indeed want it to be a second shape. So I don't want to join it to the first shape. I want to have a second body in my bodies folder. That's just the other cylinder, but a little bit bigger. Cool. Now I've got another body in my bodies folder here, and I'll call this my outer, just because anything is better than one or two.
We only have one body.
Did you?
Bodies folder.
So it could be that you accidentally chose join, and we can always go back. So
Hit OK yet.
No, oh,
But just in case, say like for example, whoops, I actually made that a join and I wanted it to be a new body, right? Down here in our timeline of events that have happened, right, so far, this extrude right here, if I right click on it and say edit feature, can I do that on my body as well? Yeah, I think also in my body and my bodies folder here, so I could right click on this outer and say edit feature. That gets me to the same place. So either right-clicking on the body in the bodies folder or right-clicking on the icon of your timeline down at the bottom. Then you could change anything about that. So you could change it from a join to a new body, or you could change the distance that it goes. So you're kind of like going back in time and redoing that step there. So I'll say OK. Now we want to do one more extrude, and that's to make like the actual top of our cap. So we've got like this inner piece made, but it doesn't have a bottom on it. And we can do that with the geometry that we have right here too. So I'm going to go ahead and from my create menu, I'm going to go ahead and choose extrude. And then I'm going to pick all 3 of the areas on the top surface of my sketch there. I'm going to extrude them up 1/4 of an inch. Now I want to join this top surface to the body that is my outer body, but I don't want to join it to the body that is my inner body. So there are 2 ways that I can do that. One is I can just turn off my inner body. I can turn off the visibility on my inner body in my bodies folder over here in my browser. So if I just turn that off so I can't see it anymore, even though I have join picked here, it's only going to join it to the bodies that are currently visible. So it'll only join this top extrusion to bodies that I currently have toggled as being visible. And then I'll say OK. It looks like I chose to make that a new body. Nope, I've got join picked here. Well, that's interesting. Why did it make it in? Do I have some sort of distance between there? Oh, ha ha ha! I see what happened. So I'm gonna change this back to 0. So what's happened here is I have not been very precise in my selection of the bodies, the profiles that I want to extrude. If I zoom in, we will see that there is a gap in the objects that I have selected. And that is because for some reason I chose right at the beginning of this class to give my can a thickness. And then we created our sketch on the surface that was the top edge of our can. And you kind of get some built-in geometry automatically when you create a surface, when you start a drawing on a surface that has like edges that intersect with it already. Does that make sense? Like this is if I turn on my can, which you can't see because it's in a different component here, if I do this, so this is the inside edge of my can and the outside edge of my can. And because we created our drawing for our cap on this edge, it kind of like gave us some built-in geometry. We didn't really need to do that project thing. I just wanted to show you how to use the project tool. Like all that geometry really existed already because we created our surface. Like if I created a surface on this table, I wouldn't need to draw a rectangle around the table because those edges kind of intersect with this surface already. Does that make sense? kind of, ish. All right, cool. So I wasn't being precise enough when I selected my bits there. And so now if I zoom in and make sure I've got all of my edges, and now I set a distance that's 1/4 of an inch. I make sure my inner body is not visible, and I'm set to join. Now when I say OK, now I indeed just have the two bodies. One that is this exterior part of my can cap here, and the second one, which I'll turn back on, is that interior bit. Alright, so let's add some threads. So it'd be nice to be able to thread this together. I thought that'd make an easy way to open and close the can, to pull in and out film as needed. And to add threads, I'm going to add threads to my inner body first. So I'm just going to turn the visibility on my outer body off. Now, threads are probably a very complicated thing, and there's probably a significant amount of maths. More than one. There's more than one math that go into the appropriate thread for your application. But for us, we're going to choose from the Create menu the Thread tool. The Thread tool does what you think it does. And in fact, initially, I really like this auto option. So most of the size, description, class, all that kind of stuff is set to auto right now. And I think that's fantastic, because most of the time I use the Thread tool, I just want to take this thing and I want to fit it into another thing. And if you leave that at auto and select that outer surface of our inner body as the object that you want to make your thread on, and we choose the little checkbox next to where it says modeled. So right now it's just kind of a flat thread. It's just kind of the illusion of a thread. And if we choose modeled, then it will make actual, real McCoy threads. And
Carl,
yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, but that seems to have left me with only the thread.
So you've got.
It looks like I have a spring.
Ah, cool. Okay, cool. So the auto does an okay job. However, the next step is like actually dialing it in. So what you want to do, Harold, is change the size of your thread so it's a little bit bigger, I want to say. So right now my size is 3.375 inches, but if I make it 4, then you can see my whole thread's got a lot bigger. And you just want to make it, but if I change mine so I have the same problem that you're having, that just swore right at me. There we go. You probably got something that looks like this.
Yep.
Yeah, so if I change it up until it, starts to become visible. So if I go up to like 3.25, it is 100% visible.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, for sure. Whatever number you choose for your thread size, you should kind of like keep that in the back of your brain hole, because we're going to need to do this same operation to the outer body, and Fusion will usually remember the last thread size you used. In fact, that's probably why I didn't have that problem, is because the last time I used the thread tool was for making the prep version of this that I made before class here. So I'm going to choose that 3 1/4 inch.
Okay, turn off your outer body right here. Okay, now go to the
And then I'm going to say okay.
thread. Where is it right there? Thread, okay. Auto. Click the outer surface.
We got some tutelage going on in class, and I'm just going to let that tutelage
There
happen.
you are. So that does the thread on the inner surface, and then you just do the converse. You would turn off the inner body, turn on the outer body, and do the whatchamacallit, do the thread on the inner surface there.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're going to do now. So now I'm going to turn off my inner body here. I'll turn my outer body on.
Good to go.
Thank you so much. I was having a problem.
And now,
Pardon?
So I was having an issue with that little, the
The top?
solid top.
Okay, I didn't see what you did there, so
Ah.
Carl might want to do that. I just happened to saw you were having a little trouble
Thank
with
you.
the thread,
Thank
so.
you.
Yeah.
I was trying to backtrack and try to figure it out myself, but then I couldn't. So the flat part,
oh yeah, and you got 2 bodies there, so you're good.
okay, so it was create another extrusion, right? I don't have the flat.
Oh, sure, you don't have the flat
thing.
top. Yeah.
So. This one, and then that
Zoom
little
way
one.
in. There you
Okay,
go.
and then when I did this though, it
Now you
looked
can-
weird.
Go.
What's this like?
Well, you were
Why did I-
seeing your sketch.
Oh.
So.
That was what was missing.
Ah. Yeah, so we were just going, hey, let me recreate this for everybody at home. So we had this going on. We're like, hey, what are these lines over here? I thought I had 2 different bodies, and I'm seeing like dividing lines, and it's just showing us our sketch. So if you just turn off the visibility on your
Okay.
sketch, then
Like, mine doesn't look like
then it looks like a solid body there.
Carl,
Yeah, Mike, go ahead.
on the male threads on the inner body, it defaulted to a 2A thread form.
Okay.
And when I went to do the female threads on the outer body, it defaulted to a 3A. A 3A, isn't that a much tighter thread? So if you would have the 2A and the 2B together for kind of a sloppier fit.
Ah.
So a 3A or a 3B for a machine fit in real life, but on a 3D printer, that's gonna mess you up.
Interesting. I didn't know what that class meant. But I'm going to show you how because I have a plan to fix that already, and we're going to get there. So to fix the tightness of our threads, we'll do that right after I make my next thread. So I've got to make the threads on the interior surface of my outer piece here. So I just went to create and then thread. I'm going to choose the surface that I'm going to make that on. I'm going to choose to make them exactly the same size. Is that right? I'm going to redo this. Yeah, 3.25. So now create, thread that bit, 3.25. That'll be fine. We're just going to roll with that. Oh, look at that. It does say B. So on my outer threads, it was giving me a class option that was all A's. And here I've got a class option that's all B's. It will be interesting to see, and we'll be able to mess with that in a second. We'll be able to do some testing here in just a second. That's a good, I like that, Mike. That's great. So I'm going to say okay, because I've made those threads now, right? And the trick that Mike is aware of with 3D printed threads is sometimes it's difficult to get the tolerance right. So you have some 3D printed items and they don't really thread into each other. because one is too tight for another one. And it's difficult for us to see that in action in the state that we have things right now. There is a way that we can slice our model in half visually here in Fusion 360. So from the Inspect menu, we can choose Section Analysis. If I choose this Section Analysis tool here, and now I'm going to zoom out so I can find those 3 drawing surfaces that I kind of get at the beginning of Fusion 360. And I pick one of the 2 surfaces that will cut my model in half vertically like this. So either that surface would work, or this surface would also work. And now I say OK. Now I can zoom in here and I can get a better look at my threads and the fit of them specifically. So if I wanted to here, now I could mess around with that A and B thing. That's interesting. So if I right click on the feature in my timeline that is my exterior thread, and I say edit feature, if I change that to a 2 or a 1, it doesn't look like it's changing it that much. So I don't.
Where's the edit feature?
So if you right click on the object in your timeline down here that you want to edit, just have to right click on it, and then you get the little menu that pops up. No? Maybe you
And then
have
also they're like,
to,
what's
maybe you have to
on this
close
one?
that, or say OK. Now maybe you can. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so you just had a window. You had a window open already. Fusion don't want to do 2 things at the same time. That's for fancy people. Alright, so if I say edit feature, I'm going to change that back to a 3. Oh, it's moving slightly. It is moving that inside edge very slightly. However, we need to move it a lot. So I'm just going to say OK here. And I'll show you the method that I use in order to make my threads fit with each other here. So from the Modify menu, now that I can see my threads here, from the Modify menu, if I choose this Press Pull option, a press or a pull is kind of like an extrude. You can take any surface and expand it out or shrink it in. And it works really good with curved surfaces. So, and that's kind of what we have here with our thread. Is we've got a surface that is kind of sweeps around the bottom, and we've got a surface that kind of sweeps around the top. And I'm going to press and pull on both of those surfaces. So if I zoom in so I can click on that edge, and I just move that back, 0.01 is usually what I end up going with. So if we just move that back 0.01 inches to give us a bigger gap there, and I say OK, I'm going to do that same operation to the top surface of my thread. So from the Modify menu, I'll go ahead and choose Press Pull. I'll zoom in so I can see really clearly that interior surface that I'm picking on there. And you can see it highlights in blue that face that kind of runs around the whole top surface of our thread there. And I'll push that out that like 0.01 inches. And I'll say OK. And then I'm going to do that a third and final time. So from the Modify menu, I'll choose Press Pull one last time. I'm going to zoom in here so I can pick on the third and last face that I have not offset, and that's the kind of the flat, up and down vertical face. It would just be a cylinder around the outside of this thing. And I'll push that out that 0.01 inches as well.
Hey, Carl.
Yeah.
Before you get too much farther, I kind of have a weird issue going on.
What do you got?
So I've done the threading action on both the inner and outer part. But for some reason, the outer ring, like it has the shading on the object as if it's thread, but it is not thread.
Ah. So this thread down here is my thread that was my outer thread. So if I right click on that and say edit feature, my guess is this modeled checkbox is not checked. If you, that was it. Cool. Yeah, so your threads look like that. Yeah. And that modeled checkbox is the key there. And that's because they do that because threads take up a lot of geometry. So the more threads you have in your model, the more the bigger your file is going to be. So if you've got a bunch of screws with threads in it, you're going to have a hard time. Your computer's going to be swearing at you while you draw. So yeah, so that's why that was happening there. And then whether you choose to shrink your interior surfaces, the outside of the thread or the inside of the thread, I leave that up to you. But I just do one side, and then I tend to get a fairly decent fit on my particular printer. It threads in pretty good, and it's pretty tight. You can come and take your engineer's opinion after class if you want, Mike. All right, cool. So we've got our threads made. We've got them offset. I have this. I'm looking at a cut view of my model here, and I kind of don't want to do that anymore. So there is a new folder here called Analysis, and in it is section 1. I suppose if we're being good Fusion 360 users, we should name this my thread view, maybe. I'll admit, I don't think I've ever named an analysis before, but it's probably best practice to do so. And then I could just turn it off, because I don't need to see it anymore. All right, now, we got 2 more things that we want to do to our model. One is, let's add some text on the outside of our model. Let's put our name on it or something. If we're going to do Solargraphy, this is going to be sitting out in the world for days at a time. And if we can write a sign on our camera, or give it a name or something like that. So from the Create menu here, I'm just going to scroll down to, actually, I need a surface to make a sketch on first. So I want to create text that goes around the outside of this curve. But first I need a flat surface that I can draw that text on. And in order to locate a flat surface, you astute astute learners will know that that information exists in the construct menu. So if we click on construct, there are lots of different ways to locate a flat surface that you can create a sketch on based on existing geometry that we already have in front of us. And one of the ways that you can create a flat surface is based on a tangent. So the tangent plane option, if we choose that, will allow us to click on this curve that is the outer surface of our outer body, and we can click on that and it will create us a flat 2D plane that is tangent to that surface. So you can rotate this around if this needs to be located in a specific area. For us, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't need to be located in a specific area here. So 0 was fine. And I'm just going to say OK. Now, on this two-dimensional surface, we can create a sketch. So from the Create menu, I'm going to go ahead and choose Create Sketch. I'm going to choose as the surface that I'm going to create that sketch on our two-dimensional flat surface here. And now that I'm editing a sketch, from my Create menu, I can find the Text tool. So the text tool is one of the few tools that's a click and drag. So you click and drag to create a kind of a text box. You can resize this box later, but you gotta click and make a text box by clicking one time and then moving over and clicking a second time. I always kind of got frustrated because I'd be out here like trying to click on the text, like, hey, how come I can't edit this text? But the text that you actually input is in the text window. So if I find the little text window here, there's a little text box there that says text. And we could write Carl's camera. Don't touch, or I will punch you in the eye. You can put whatever you want on your outside of your camera there. You could put your phone number maybe, that might make sense. You know, because like pretend like you're a 5-year-old and your mother wrote your phone number on your camera, so if one of your neighbors finds it, it'll make its way home. I thought we could resize this. Oh boy. Alright, put my text tool away. Text. There we go. Pinhole camera. I'm going to choose to center align my text. I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter. But, you know, because we're just wrapping it around a cylinder. But it is what it is. Alright, and then I'm going to say OK. Now that we've got that text window out of the way, now I can move this text around. So I can just click and drag on it to move it around. And I'm just going to stick it roughly centered top to bottom ish on my cylinder. We're not measuring here. We probably could be measuring. In fact, I should be zooming in, like I always encourage people to do, and just get a good look and center it up to top to bottom, and then I'm going to say finish sketch.
What if it doesn't fit? Like yours is
Ah.
upside down all the way?
Yes, so that's totally fine because we're going to wrap it around the outside. So here, let me exaggerate
So you want
this.
the top and bottom to be fit?
Yeah, the top and bottom need to fit. So edit sketch. There we go. Double click on that thing. So what we got here is so clearly my text is wider than my cylinder is, but it's going to fit top to bottom. And you can change the height of your text in that text window. So
How do
you
you
get
pull up the edit text?
so once you're editing your sketch, if you just hover over your text and then double click, then the height of your text can be changed within the little height menu box there. And then I'm going to say OK. And I'm also going to say finish sketch. So now I've got my sketches folder here with yet another brand new sketch in it, and I'm going to go ahead and name that my text sketch, just so I know. Oh, I lost my connection to the internet. Just take a little pause because I think I lost Harold here. Harold, I think my internet dropped out there. How much did you miss?
I don't think much.
Okay, cool. So I was just kind of talking about how to edit text. So if I right click and say edit sketch here, all you have to do to change something about this text is you double click on it, and then you get your text box open here. Now you have to be editing a sketch already. So here I've got my sketch palette open. I can't edit this text if I'm not already editing a sketch. And then you can change the height of it. We need our text to fit height-wise. We don't need it to fit width-wise because we're going to be wrapping it around our cylinder. So I'll just say finish sketch there. And now the last step we have here is I went ahead and named that sketch in my sketches folder inside of my cap component. So now I can, up in my create menu, I can choose the emboss option. Emboss is a pretty cool tool. And what it allows us to do is select a sketch profile of, in our case, this text that we want to emboss. And then in our emboss window, if I choose select the face that is the exterior of our cylinder there, now we can choose to emboss it up or deboss it down. And for the purposes of 3D printing, it's probably easier to print a debossed text than it is embossed text because there's not like bits hanging out in the air that they might not print as well. You won't need any support material for it. So if we just choose to emboss that in, and then I'm gonna leave that default depth where it is, just for the sake of time, and say OK. Now I can turn off my text bit there, and there we've got a Pinhole Camera logo or label ready to go.
Carl,
Yeah.
with the text entry window, it has a limited width. For example, you type in something like, you touch on my camera, I break a you face.
Right.
That takes up 2 lines normally. But when you are going to be embossing it onto the perimeter of the cylinder, it would easily fit. Is there any way to tell it to go with, let's say, 160 character instead of 80 or 40 or whatever?
Oh, to like for it to automatically go
Right.
down. Gosh, I don't think so.
So I mean, you're limited to just like a short text statement.
Yeah,
when
you're
you
limited.
have this whole circumference to work with.
Well, you're limited to the circumference.
Right, I'm just
Yeah.
saying that you are limited to much less than that with the text box.
Oh, well, you can expand. I can expand the text box, so I can make this longer. And I think your suggestions was touch my camera, I break your face.
It goes down to the second line.
Yeah, so if I say okay here, that's just because this particular text box is not big enough. So if I just expand this text box,
Okay.
you just have to expand the text box when you're not editing the text. So while I'm editing my
the
text
box and the instruction is really immaterial. It's the size of the text box on your sketch.
exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah, and now in theory, if I say finish sketch, it will just go ahead and it just went ahead and
Nice.
picked that, and look, it's almost exactly the same size. Perfect. I want to do one last thing just before we wrap up. I just want to add a little chamfer to the top and bottom edge. So from the modify menu, if we choose this chamfer option, just because you're going to have to touch this this thing a lot when you're unscrewing and screwing in your camera or your top and bottom here. And sometimes like 3D printed edges are not the most friendly. So if you just give it a little chamfer, it'll make, touching this to unscrew it and screw it back in a lot nicer. You won't be rubbing your hand over a 90-degree edge. It just makes it softer. You could 100%, you could do a fillet. I will say fillets don't always print very nicely, at least on my printer. So a fillet, I think it makes sense to print this upside down like this, right? And a chamfer is just a 45-degree angle.
Yeah.
So my printer does these 45-degree angles really nicely. If it's a curve, it doesn't always end up with the nicest looking of curves. But your Prusa is nicer than mine for sure. So yours might do it like a champion. All right, so that is it. If I make my pinhole camera my main document or my active component again, and I turn on my can, and I ask nicely for my computer to stop doing the night thing. There we go. Now I'll zoom out, and here's our pinhole camera thing. We got a cap, a can, and we just need to poke a hole in it and stick some film in there and start making long exposures to the sun. Woo!
Did you see that Mike did test it out and actually got some kind of working results out of his?
Yeah, he sent me the picture, and I'm going to add it to the blog post that I made. So it's pretty cool. I'm going to load mine up and see if I can make an exposure by next week. I ordered on McMaster, I ordered some threaded tripod mounts, some heat insert tripod mounts, and they will be here in the rapid time of 7 weeks. So
A standard tripod mount is just a 1/4-20 thread, unless you're talking a pro camera, and that's a 3/8-16 thread.
Yeah. So the 1/4-20 heat insert mounts apparently are a 7-week lead time at McMaster. Normally I get things like next day at McMaster, which is crazy. But anyway, so I ordered 50 of them. So if anybody needs one, I have one for you. All right, so that's it for class today. Next week we'll start a new project. I got a request to do a CNC project. We haven't done that for a while. So next week we're going to do start a CNC project, and we'll do that for a couple weeks and see how we do. If you have not done so already, or not visited already, we have for Model Monday, and Harold, you can check this out too. I made us a little website, and on this website, you can see a couple of past projects. But at the bottom, there's a link to join us live. And it's modelmonday.carrd.co. This is kind of a cool thing. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but card.co is just a way to create some like small one-page websites. So I've been utilizing this. And then the key here that I wanted to point out is I started a Discord server for us. So there's a link to Discord here. This is a new experiment for me. But if you join our Discord, then you can like ask me questions while I'm not, if you don't see me at the space, or if you just prefer to join online, you can ask me questions on the Discord, or you can recommend a class, or so that kind of thing. So if you'd like to shout out to me on Discord, I will 100% listen to your recommendations and questions. Cool. We'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, Carol.
Thanks, Carl.